Good afternoon and welcome to the April 7th meeting of City Council. This meeting is being held electronically in accordance with Section 238, subsection 3.3 of the Municipal Act and Section 16.6.24 of the City of Woodstock Procedure Bylaw. This meeting is being live streamed to the city's YouTube channel and a recording will be posted on the city's website following the meeting. The meeting will also be broadcast on Rogers TV. An agenda of the meeting can be found on the agendas, meetings, and minutes page of the city's website. Councilors will be raising their hands in view of their webcam when moving a motion, requesting to speak, and when a vote is being taken. If a member of council is disconnected, is having technical difficulties, we will take a recess in order to attempt to rectify the issue. If technical difficulties exist that prevent the meeting from continuing, the meeting will be adjourned and reconvened at a later time. If a councillor needs to leave the meeting at any time, they are requested to inform the clerk. I now ask councillor members to open their screens. So we'll continue with the agenda. There's no closed session. Disclosure of conflict of interest. Hearing none. Matters arising from the minutes. The minutes. Councillor Tate, you have the resolution for the council minutes.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Petter, that the minutes of the regular meeting of Woodstock City Council held on March 17th, 2022 be adopted.
All in favor? Thank you. Additions to the agenda. We don't have any today. Presentations. Our first delegation is David Simpson, Director of Public Works, Oxford County, David Watt, GM Blue Plan Engineering Limited, and Jim Harnum, Municipal VU Consulting Inc., Joint Water and Wastewater Services Delivery Review. Go ahead, gentlemen.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Lauder. I'll get it kicked off. For those of you that may not know me, I'm David Simpson, Director of Public Works at Oxford County. I'm joined here today with two of the consultants that worked on the Joint Water and Wastewater Service Delivery Review. Acting Mayor Lauder, just an update, David Watt was originally planned to be part of the delegation today, but Andrea Clemencio will be in his place from GM Blue Plan, along with Jim Harnum from Municipal View. I'll ask Andrea just to open up the slide deck first and share her screen and we can get rolling. Thank you. Thanks, Andrea. We can just jump to the next slide, please. So again, just a little bit of what we'll be running through today. I know you've already seen this in terms of the delegation that's come with the agenda bundle, so I won't spend too much time on that, but we'll just jump right into the project background. Next slide, please, Andrea. So again, very appreciative of the opportunity to present a high-level overview of the Joint Service Delivery Review of water distribution and wastewater collection service provisions across the county, which obviously includes services that are currently being provided in Tillsonburg and Woodstock. So I wanted to provide you just with a little bit of the background regarding Oxford's water and wastewater systems before I introduce the consultant team. So as you can see here, under the Municipal Act, Oxford obviously holds the exclusive municipal authority for all of the water and wastewater services. Similarly, Oxford County also owns all of the water distribution and wastewater collection assets. And I'm sure, as Woodstock is very aware, Woodstock currently operates and maintains the county's assets within the urban limits of Woodstock under service provider agreements with the county. Next slide, please, Andrea. So just a little bit about how the service delivery review came to be. We had an opportunity to pursue some municipal funding back through a formal council report that went in March of 2021. So basically that was the first acknowledgement and direction from County Council to proceed with the service delivery review. We then proceeded to receive approval from the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing in June of 2021. From there, we started working on a joint terms of reference and request for proposal for that service delivery review. So we did reach out to both City Public Works staff and CEO, as well as Tillsonburg Public Works staff and CEO, to allow an opportunity for the terms of reference and the RFP to be reviewed and commented on prior to us releasing it to market. Upon the release to market, we did have a number of submission bids. Obviously, GM Blue Plan with their subconsultant Municipal View was the successful candidate that was awarded the assignment in September 2021. And just a note on that award, that was a joint RFP evaluation with staff from Tillsonburg, staff from Woodstock, and staff from the county, which basically technically evaluated the submissions that were received at the time. Based on that, the consultants finished their final information reports on March 23rd. So that was brought to County Council on the same date. And that similar report was shared with Woodstock Clerk on March 28th as part of the County Council Report PW 2022-19. So again, at this point, that's just a quick introduction of the project. Really, the county's role here was to act as a project coordinator, but the consultants had access to all three public works teams from Tillsonburg, Woodstock, and the county. So again, I'll just introduce Andrea Clemencia to take over the next few slides from GM Blue Plan, who will later pass it over to Jen Harmon from Municipal View. Thank you.
Thank you, David, and good afternoon, Madam Chair, Council, and staff. Jim and I today are here to present some highlights of the report that is part of the agenda. So we are skirting through some of the key points that we wanted to make sure are noted by the group, and some of the thinking behind the conclusions, a little bit about our methodology, and our welcome questions afterwards. So we'll begin. Oh, I'm not getting a response here. There we go. So our objective for the overall project was, we wanted to start really by saying what we were tasked with doing right from the request for proposal. And then we reiterated this through our workshops. We wanted to make sure it was clear that we were trying to come at this systematically with a defined methodology, data-based wherever we could, to try to determine the most appropriate and cost-effective way to provide water distribution and wastewater collection services across the county. And we wanted to make sure this evaluation included consideration of service levels, either maintaining the current service levels or improving them. We'll get into a bit about what those service levels were or how we established that baseline, because it is really a fundamental part of being able to evaluate various service delivery models. Across the top there's a few rectangles just to show generally the sequence of the project. At the front end, we wanted to make sure there was extensive consultation with Town of Tillsonburg, City of Woodstock, and the county staff. And that was done in parallel with a deep dive into the data, whatever data we were able to get our hands on through staff provision. We went online. We did some data review of other municipalities to try to put together a current state, to try to really define where are things today and how can you define that, what metrics can indicate how the services are being provided, and then move into what alternate models of providing water and wastewater services can be considered. So the scope here was was distribution and collection, water distribution and wastewater collection. Treatment was not included. So the focus really was on the models as soon as the treatment of the waste or the water crosses into the distribution systems, or as soon as the wastewater that's collected from the systems within that scope, not into the treatment involved. And then we put this together, and through a series of additional workshops, worked through the current state and through the models, and then landed on our recommendations. So you want to make sure that we wanted to make sure that this was collaborative as much as possible, that we were validating information as it came in through these workshops before we generated this final report that you see. Evaluation of the models themselves can't just be cost. As I'm sure you can all appreciate, it's often a driver, but we wanted to make sure we had a full spectrum of criteria to consider. So that list there, we looked at legislation, and that would include also agreements, legal commitments through operating agreements or union agreements, service levels, as I said, the current structure for the organizations and how they're governed. We looked at planning and sustainability, and I know that's a pretty generic term, but we were trying to consider how sustainable, how this service delivery model could, or these variety of models can be carried into the future, and financially what might impact those. We looked into customer relations, generally did an evaluation of pros and cons. We considered risk, a very large fundamental part of the consideration, and those that was done through workshops with the 3 groups. And then lastly, the financials. We considered revenues, expenditures, capital and operating. We looked at reserves. We looked at capital forecasts through your asset management plans, and then finally started to try to do some cost of service comparisons, acknowledging there's assumptions that are involved, and sometimes it's as close as apples to apples as we could include. Levels of service you'll probably hear often in asset management and in operational planning. We landed on a table of levels of service which are included in the report, and they're really meant to be what service is provided to the community through water distribution or wastewater collection, and how can you measure that? How can you demonstrate what service is being provided? And we identified a series of metrics or indicators, and some of them are on this screen. There were additional ones that are included in the report, but these are ones we wanted to focus on today, mostly because they have industry standards. There are industry best practices associated with these service levels, and it gives a great baseline to say where is a municipality? Are you above? Are you below? Or are you right on track? So we were able to also use these because there is sufficient data in most cases to demonstrate where a municipality is performing related to these service levels. So things like water main valves, whether they're being cycled or inspected, things like hydrant flushing, hydrant flow testing, closed circuit television inspection of sewers, and flushing of sewers, just preventive flushing, even maintenance hole inspections. We've listed here where the industry reference came from and what general industry standard has been established for the frequency of these kind of services. And then we included in the report the performance for each of the parties against these levels of service. So the current state picture started to be painted really just for each group, as with Tilsonburg and City of Woodstock acting as operating authorities for the distribution and collection systems. It was important for us to paint that whole picture and consider the perspectives of each of the groups. So we laid out who had responsibilities and authorities for what type of activities. What does service provision of water distribution and wastewater collection look like? And generally, we lumped it into these 7 bullets: water billing, wastewater billing, customer service, engineering, and that's a generic one, but it included more specific specific services within the report. Then the actual operation, maintenance, ongoing monitoring of the system. Planning, another generic term, but really talking about looking forward in all the planning and development considerations and how those fold into the capital. We looked at the policy and legal considerations, and then this generic list of responsibilities talking about drinking water quality management. That's the DWQMS, backflow considerations or backflow prevention, and budgeting in general, how the systems are planned for fiscally, and lumped all of those general tasks into a series of responsibilities as well. From that, and with the data review, we started to distill some metrics. And again, these were dynamic. We started to unfold how to measure or define current state as the data came in, and we could evaluate the quality of the information that we had. So these are an example. There's quite a few more in the report, but for example, for water distribution, we heard from the group and agreed that an evaluation of staffing, a good starting metric is looking at the number of operators. This would be more frontline staff. It's not including supervisory staff, but how many operators or how many kilometers of distribution main or collection main are assigned, if you will, to an operator. So we looked at the total kilometers, the staffing, and then we're able to get these metrics. So you can see there variation for water distribution in Oxford is about 45 kilometers per operator. Woodstock had 31, let's say, and 47 for Tillsonburg, and the same for wastewater collection. So great metric, tells us some information, but obviously doesn't tell the whole story. There's more metrics that we started to review, and then started also to include the fiscal considerations. So here we were evaluating the various operating expenditures and indexed to various data that we had. So we did index to the number of kilometers of water distribution and wastewater system main. And that index allows us to compare more generically or more effectively across the 3 systems. So the green here is indicating the wastewater operating expenditures per kilometer, and the blue would be the water. And here you'd see the Tillsonburg system based on the budget and actuals. We did review both. Operates with the highest expenditures per kilometer, followed by Woodstock and then Oxford. And this, of course, is a lumped evaluation. All of the operating expenditures were put together. Within our analysis, we did break it down, and the report discusses some of those considerations. So although Tillsonburg, for example, had fewer staff, more kilometers assigned per operator, and as a result, perhaps as a result, has higher operating expenditures per kilometer, also contracts out more per kilometer, or spends more on operating expenditures for contracting out, trying to offset those operator shortfalls. So those things contribute to the costs there. But within these numbers, for example, Oxford has a greater geography to cover. So Oxford's expenditures related to operational support across the geography would be greater than the other 2. Tillsonburg and Woodstock obviously being more urban in nature and having a smaller geography. So you can see the numbers are varied, But in general, when we put the operating expenditures together, this would be the result. And we also heard from the group that they wanted to make sure we were considering the operating costs per customer, since a kilometer of water main that's more rural in nature is very different than a kilometer of water main in an urban setting. So we wanted to index that operating expenditure to customers, which we used as the metered water accounts were the indication of a customer here. And again, a similar spread in variation, with Tillsonburg being the most expensive, and followed by Woodstock and then Oxford. When we went in a little bit deeper and started to set up for these metrics and how to show current state, and in moving to an evaluation of risk and consideration of other servicing, this framework is really a fundamental piece of what we do, and often comes up in our asset management work as well. This is really municipal life, this triangle of balancing cost to a level of service to the community to risk. Somewhere in the middle is the trade-off, is the point at which the municipality has decided to land. And you as council make those decisions to move around that triangle. You might want to increase level of service, and as such, cost and risk change. You might want to reduce costs, and as such, level of service and risk change. So you can see it's a triangle that always requires this trade-off. The key is being able to identify where you are on these three elements, and then when you're exploring other options, to consider the impacts on cost, level of service, and risk, which is what we carried through in this report. At this point, I'm going to hand it over to Jim.
Thanks, Andrea, and good afternoon, acting mayor and members of council. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the three models that we explored, and give you some insights into some of the things that we found through our data consultations and through some of the experiences. So model A looked at Oxford operating all of the water distribution and wastewater collection. So this would be Oxford's currently the owner of all of the systems, but we know in Woodstock and Tillsonburg, they are considered the operating authority. So model A would have those contracts ended, and Oxford would operate all of the water distribution and wastewater collection in all of municipalities. Under model B, we would have the water distribution and wastewater collection assets transferred to Woodstock and Tillsonburg. So this would see the actual ownership in the operating authority become the local municipality, just in those two municipalities, and the other municipalities would stay with Oxford being the owner and operator. And the last model we explored was the external agencies operating all of the water distribution and wastewater collection systems in all of Oxford. So that would be all of the municipalities. Next slide, please. Model A, refresh your memory just from the last slide, is Oxford operating all of the systems, owning and operating all of the systems. And these are more of the subjective. We'll get into the financial in a few minutes, but these are some of the things that we find through the discussion and through the data that we were able to mine. So this model aligns the accountability with the responsibility. We know that Oxford has experience operating other water distribution and wastewater collection systems. With this model, we have a more appropriate supervisory and span of control. So when you have the economies of scale, you have a more appropriate reporting structure with X number of employees being the span of control reporting to the supervisor. Again, the economies of scale in the admin and overhead. So the more systems you have, you can spread that overhead over the operations. Currently, the WQMS is carried out in triplicate. So the drinking water quality management system is carried out for 3 separate operating authorities. This model would allow one DWQMS system to be carried out and eliminating that triplication. We also identified a redundancy and a reduce of risk in the overall responsible operators and the operator in charge roles. Currently, Tilsonburg and Woodstock have smaller staffing, and that can create some risks with respect to the overall responsible operator and the operator in charge. We felt there's better coordination in the long-range asset planning in Model A. They have equally good customer service. However, they will require a detailed transition plan. So if this was to occur and council decided to move ahead with this model, there would be a requirement for a detailed transition plan. It would also require Oxford to learn the systems in Woodstock and Tilsonburg. However, this could be mitigated through some extent with the transfer of staff if they were to go over to Oxford from Woodstock and Tilsonburg. Next slide, please. So Model B, refresh your memory, is that's transferring the assets to Woodstock and Tilsonburg. So then they would become the operator and the owner and the operating authority. Again, this aligns the accountability with the responsibility similar to Model A. Also, the municipalities have experience operating water distribution and wastewater collection. They have equally good customer service throughout our data reviews. We saw excellent customer service in all three municipalities. Would need, in our opinion, additional technical administrative resources to address the role as owner. It's not simply taking over as owner. There's a lot of background information that's in the report that comes with being the owner of the asset. There would be a loss of economies of scale in the admin and overhead. So you would end up having 3 municipalities doing the same things with respect to customer service, with respect to planning, hydraulic reviews, asset management, development reviews, all of those types of issues. The DWQMS would continue to be carried out in triplicate, the drinking water quality management system. And then this is a big thing here for this model. There'd be numerous further studies required. There's staffing, lawyers, there's issues with the ownership and having to deal with the Ministry of Environment, and so there's a bunch of different studies, and we've estimated those one-time capital or studies to be approximately $575,000 to $825,000. Next slide, please. Model C, this was the model where we had all of the operations, including the other systems that Oxford currently operates, contracted out to an Aqua or Veolia or OMI, one of the large contractors or agencies. They also have experience operating water distribution and wastewater collection. This model does allow for transfer of some risk and responsibilities. But part of the model of contracting out allows the owner to transfer some of that risk and pay for that. And back to the triangle that Andrea spoke about, this would be transferring some of your risk to the outside contractor. However, there is a profit motive, and that may have, I would not say it will, but that may have a negative impact on the assets themselves. With the profit motive, their decisions being made around profit could affect the quality of the maintenance of those assets. A detailed operating contract and lengthy RFP process would be required. This is typically 18 months to 2 years to develop the actual contract and then go out to market and see who's interested in bidding on this. It would require an extensive transition plan, much more so than Model A or Model B, due to the fact that they would be taking over all distribution and collection of the municipalities. And any changes in legislation in the future would most likely cause extras. And this is a common theme that happens with contracting out large municipal operations. They're typically 10-year terms. In that 10 years, the legislation can change, and there are some legislation changes on the horizon. And we don't know what the impact of those are now, so they typically end up costing more money in the long run through extras. This was the most disruptive model to staff. And the last thing here is the loss of knowledge in operating water distribution and wastewater collection. So you end up getting married to the contractor, and you lose all of your frontline staff, and the ability to revert back to that is much more difficult in the future. Next slide, please. So here's the costing. We have the status quo. It's 5.67 million, 5.7 million for rounding. And then we look at Model A. And again, these are based on some assumptions that are all in the report. Model A looks at a savings of approximately $1 million or 18% reduction in the operating cost. Model B looks at a increase of $488,000 or a 9% increase. Model C is again about an $850,000 increase or a 10% increase. So you'll see here also there's a model that we added later in the game, which was called the Status Quo Plus. So the Status Quo Plus has merit, and the Status Quo Plus is basically the status quo with improvements in efficiencies, which then are directed, those savings and efficiencies are directed to improvements in customer service and reduction of risk. So Status Quo Plus, and I'll get into that in the next slide, is really around the best practices and how can we improve the status quo. If we didn't do Model A, B, or C, how would we improve the status quo, which was part of our assignment to come up with. So next slide, please. And it was sitting, sorry, at roughly the same amount at $5.7 million. The reason for that, as I said, there's a bunch of improvements efficiencies that happen, and those dollars are used to improve service levels and improve and lower risk. So I won't go into these in detail, but these are detailed in your report. Backflow as a user fee, standard service levels. We saw the service level chart from Andrea. Joint procurement, making sure that we are coordinating all of our procurement, potentially collapsing water and wastewater reserves, looking at capital coordination in the right-of-way. That happens now. There is quite a bit of coordination in the right-of-way, but continuing that and furthering that and getting more detailed coordination in the right-of-way. Looking at inflow and infiltration studies. So that's rainwater getting into your sewer systems, which we know in many of the areas that is the case. And how do we eliminate that, which reduces dollars at the treatment plant for treating that wastewater and rainwater. And then looking at all of the user fees and coming up with a full cost recovery, making sure that everything we charge for that isn't part of the water or wastewater rate is appropriately charged to either contractors or developers or businesses through a full cost recovery review. Next slide, please. So we took all of these models, both the items in the previous slide, which were the improvements to the status quo, as well as the three models, and we plotted that on an ease of implementation over benefits scatter graph. So we'll see here, and this is again detailed in your report along with the scoring. What we look at is ease of implementation versus the benefits we'll receive. And in the ease of implementation, we have how easy is the implementation or the change, what is the time to implement it, and what is the cost to implement it. And then under the benefits, we have the potential cost savings. Will it improve customer service or the levels of service, and will it improve the service levels, which are the three areas or two of the three areas in the triangle that Andrea spoke about. Next slide, please. Where you want to be is up here in the green, and you know that a lot of them fall into the green area here along the ease of implementation and benefits access. Model A scored the highest, which is number one. Model B, which scored one of the lowest, and that's for a number of reasons that are described in the slides that I presented to you. What's really important here is number four, which is status quo plus. It's right about in the middle. And the reason for that is it does have benefits. It doesn't have a lot of cost savings, but it does improve customer service. It is difficult to implement because you've got to basically implement number 5 to 11 in order for the status quo plus to be a reality. So that's where number 4, let's say, scored higher on benefits, but less on the ease of implementation than, say, number 7, which was joint procurement. Again, to recap, number 4 is number 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11, all completed, which would give you the status quo plus of number 4. Next slide, please. We did make a recommendation. We recommended an alternative service delivery model to the status quo that has been recommended for consideration, which in our opinion, most optimally balances water and wastewater systems operation levels of service, cost, and risk, or the triangle. Next slide. We're recommending Model A as it offers the most advantages and the least number of disadvantages and risks to the county and its citizens. It is recommended that Model A be further pursued as a preferred model to deliver water distribution and wastewater collection services in Oxford County. Model A involves that the County of Oxford assuming full operating authority responsibility for water distribution, wastewater collection in Tillsonburg and Woodstock, and continuing water distribution and wastewater collection operating authority for all of the other area municipalities, and that the county continues to own all of the assets in this regard. Contractual agreements with the town and city of Woodstock would not be renewed. Next slide, please. And I believe David is going to finish us off here.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Just to wrap up the presentation in terms of an update of where we're at in the project at this stage, as per a condition of the funding from the Municipal Affairs and Housing Office of the province, the joint service delivery review final report has been publicly posted. So that was again a strict condition and a time-sensitive condition of the funding. Obviously, there's ongoing review of the independent joint service delivery final report findings and recommendations. I do know the respective CAOs have been getting together between Tillsonburg, Woodstock, and the county just to discuss the information and going over next steps at that level. And I understand the both Tillsonburg and Woodstock are reviewing the information further and may be preparing local reports on the service delivery review by the end of May back to county council. At the county staff level, obviously, we're waiting to receive feedback from the area municipalities and any reporting that might come in that regard with respect to the service delivery reviews. We have heard a recommendation from the consultants tonight in terms of which model they feel is appropriate going forward. At the staff level, we haven't made a decision yet in terms of which model we'll be recommending the county council, but we'll certainly be considering the consultant's independent service delivery review recommendation in that regard. So based on that and a recent motion at county council, our next notification and key deliberation point would be back on June 8th, 2022 at county council, where again, the consultants would be brought back to give a formal presentation to Oxford County Council. That would be paralleled with a specific report from staff regarding the preferred service delivery approach going forward. And then really that's the point, given, all of the assets are owned and Oxford's the water authority, that's the point where any of the final deliberations pertaining to the service delivery review would unfold at that point. So again, we're really here today in the spirit of collaboration and information sharing with Woodstock Council. We certainly want to seek any further clarity or perspectives you might have on the service delivery review information and report that's been provided to you. Just recognizing that we're here today to talk about the information that's contained in the report, but certainly we're not here to deliberate any of the findings of the review at this point. That's something that will respectfully occur at Oxford County Council. So on that point, Acting Mayor Lauder, certainly open to any questions we can field with consultants available.
Thank you. Are there any questions through? Councillor Schadenberg?
Yeah, thanks. Through to Acting Mayor, likely to Mr. Simpson from the County of Oxford. As you know, I'm not on County Council, just a member of City Council only, but I do pay close attention to agendas and minutes and whatnot from the County Council side. When was it budgeted, both a dollar amount and an actual recommendation by County Council to approve even doing this study to begin with? In other words, was there a crack in the sidewalk or something that really felt that this needed to be done? And if so, when was it recommended by City or County Council to go ahead and do this study?
Thank you. Through the Acting Mayor to Councillor Schadenberg. Certainly that information was provided to Woodstock City Council in correspondence. I'm just looking at the correspondence report here. Essentially, if you look at page 2 of that report under communications, it illustrates to you in terms of when that decision-making was made and when County Council gave staff specific direction to proceed with the service delivery review.
Anything further, Councillor Schadenberg? Councillor Accioni?
Thank you. Through the acting mayor, Connie Lauder, I think I'm going to put this one to Jim, since you presented this. This is on the scatter graph. Okay, and I wouldn't mind Mr. Simpson's maybe input on this as well, but the ease of implementation scoring and advantages of the status quo option on the scatter graph seem questionable. Items 5 through number 11 are all part of the status quo option, but are part of all the other options as well. It would seem that the status quo would have the advantages of all the other models as well. So why would negotiating renewal of service agreements be perceived as a more difficult task than taking over new service networks, displacing our employees, transferring materials and assets, and trying to familiarize yourselves with such a new system and set up new personnel to deal with it? Like, how is that accounted for?
Sure.
Or is it? I don't even think it is. That's the problem with this report.
I'm happy to answer that unless, David, you'd like to start.
Go ahead, Jim. Thanks.
So we looked at those 6 categories, which were the ease of implementation over the benefits. And the status quo plus didn't score as high in the benefits because the price was roughly the same. So that's where the $1 million savings in Model A scored higher. So you'll see it much higher on the benefits scale than the status quo plus. The ease of implementation, it's all of those issues have to be, in order for the status quo plus financials to be realized, all of those items 5 to 11 have to be considered complete, which is the time to implement, which in the Model A, the time to implement could be as little as 3 to 6 months. So if you look at those items, so we scored
status quo.
Sorry,
Status quo is also, I mean, you don't have any time frame there.
Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, we didn't rate the status quo. We only rated the status quo plus. Everyone agreed that the status quo was needed work and was broken. And that's
Curious to know who thought it needed to be reworked. Mr. Simpson himself?
For you, Madam Chair, I'll answer that in through our discussions and then let Mr. Simpson answer.
Thank you.
Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, sorry, Madam Chair. Through you, we had discussions and workshops with all of the staff, and we had independent workshops with Woodstock staff, and then we had joint meetings with all of the three municipalities. And it was clear through our discussions, which are detailed in the notes and throughout the report, the issues that needed fixing with the status quo. And that's where the improvements to the status quo plus come into play. Well, I'll turn that over to Mr. Simpson.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Yeah, just to add on that, again, we purposely reached out with the service delivery review approach to both Tillsonburg and Woodstock to appropriately scope the terms of reference. So from that, again, there was joint merit and joint interest in really assessing the current state and finding not only level of service enhancements, but also potential cost savings. So I can clearly state at that point, there was a strong consensus by all 3 parties to further seek enhancements to the existing status quo. Thank you.
Anything further, Councillor Accioni?
I want to put my head around something, so please come back to me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Petter?
Yes, through the acting mayor to, I guess, Mr. Simpson. Just being a Woodstock councillor, not an Oxford County councillor, am I getting the drift of this, that this has absolutely no jurisdiction on us whatsoever? The county will decide which route they're going to go, and we're just getting this as a courtesy?
Through the acting mayor to Councillor Petter, I would say far from that. Obviously, we've gone into this assignment eyes open as a collaborative project right from the establishment of the terms of reference. So I can assure you all three public works staff and CEOs have been working towards a common objective on this. All parties have had equal opportunities to provide input, to position perspectives. So by no means is it a foregone conclusion in terms of what the preferred model will be going forward. At the end of the day, yes, it is ultimately a county council decision, given they're the water authority and they own the assets. We could have very easily just gone ahead with a study in absence of Tillsonburg and Woodstock and excluded those two parties from the process. We did nothing to that extreme whatsoever. Alternatively, we heavily collaborated with all parties throughout the full assignment. So that would be my perspective on your comment.
I didn't mean to insinuate that wasn't being done. I'm just saying the bottom line is it's going to be county council that makes that decision, not Woodstock.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Now, as a follow-up to that, obviously Model A is being leaned towards. Model C might as well be thrown out by what I'm looking at. So under Model A, can anybody give me any numbers or percentage of what it would save the Woodstock taxpayer for water and water treatment?
Certainly, Councillor Potter, with respect to that, you could certainly expect that in terms of the impact on taxpayer rate, there would be some offsetting there. A big factor that'll be driving what the upcoming rates are will be what our updated replacement costs for water and wastewater infrastructure will be. There is a full-fledged county council report coming with a fulsome 2021 asset management plan update in that regard, which we expect will be putting more and more pressure on rates. So what we're trying to seek here is whether or not there's opportunities for not only level of service enhancements, but cost savings that may potentially position everyone to lower or offset the impact to the ratepayer.
Just my last follow-up. We mentioned a little bit about staffing. Does anybody have a handle on what kind of staffing changes would be from the city to the county under the Model A? And how much could we do with that staffing problem from our end to make sure that nobody was put out of a job?
Yeah, certainly. I believe with the model that the consultants are considering, a lot of those finite details would be captured through that proposed transition plan. In the event Model A is the preferred model and B is accepted by county council, certainly there's a fluid opportunity for a staff to move without job loss per se. Also, there's a number of new positions I understand within the city of Woodstock's budget this year, where should some of those existing operators not choose to potentially move to a county-based system, there would be other potential opportunities to fill those new positions that have been afforded through the city's 2022 budget. I think that, along with the potential growth in assessment, which we're obviously fortunate to have not only as a county, but at the city level, that would also help provide other opportunities to offset some of that potential impact with staffing.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Accioni.
Thank you. Through the chair to, I think I'll go to Jim again, if I may, with this. And again, David, please stay close because you just talked about this. Coordination and asset management. What does the county think the impact on capital projects will be with the city staff no longer doing their engineering? Currently, the city determines which roads need to be constructed based on the condition of the underground infrastructure, the water mains, and the sewer system. The city budgets for the work, prepares the designs, tenders, and administers construction work. We know the condition of the underground infrastructure because we maintain the water mains and the sewers, and we complete the condition assessments. This model has functioned very well for decades, and there is no conflict or coordination needed. Under the proposed model, the city will not have the wastewater condition information. We'll make our own decisions which roads to be reconstructed on the basis of the surface condition of the road, not on the condition of the underground infrastructure. Any sewer, water infrastructure work necessary that is not under a road to be reconstructed will result in the additional cost to rebuild the surface of the road. This will significantly increase system costs. So why doesn't this report identify these significant additional costs? So right off the bat to Jim first, please.
Sure. I'll take a stab at our work in that, and then I'll let David discuss the Oxford County's opinion on that. From our perspective, the coordination of capital, whether it's in a regional road or on a county road, or whether it's in a local road, happens all the time. So that information is shared now, and many municipalities across Ontario, in fact, a majority of the GTAH and other municipalities have this issue where the assets are in the roadway that they own and that they operate. So there are many processes in place to share and coordinate between the groups and ensure that that capital is coordinated. So I don't see a huge change in other than discussions at the staff level. Through you, Madam Acting Mayor, I don't see a lot of changes there. That's our opinion and my experiences over 35 years in municipal government.
Acting Mayor Lauder, just to build off of Jim's comment there, again, to me, I'm not understanding why we think the collaboration would discontinue at that point. You would still be seeking the same information. It's just a matter of roles and responsibilities would change to some degree, but the end game, to Jim's point earlier, is to use optimized decision making to best harmonize the buried infrastructure with the surface roadwork. So I'm at a loss why we think that constant communication would change. It would just be how that information gets managed. It would be the part that would potentially differ in a different model of service. Thank you.
I guess if I may, through the chair, one of my biggest issues, and I'm not on county council as well, I'm just a regular councillor, but so I represent the city of Woodstock citizens solely. And it's no secret, the county doesn't like to share a lot of information with the city. There's a lot of tension here. I don't think we need another whole layer of potential in the way to fix some water mains or something. Like, if I can continue, middle of the night, water main breaks and the whole neighborhood loses water. Right now, city does the work itself. We just go ahead, do it. No questions asked, right? My understanding is county doesn't do this. They sub it all out. Is that correct?
That is not the case. Thank you.
So during the night, county staff would go out and fix.
Correct. We have similar on-call emergency response to what the city would have in place.
Is that a fact?
Absolutely, that's a fact.
Interesting. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Tate?
Yeah, through your worship, Councillor Accioni asked a question, and just for clarification, because I don't think you got the right answer back. Our staff did say that status quo wasn't acceptable, but there was a reason for that, and it didn't have to do with our service. The consultants were made aware of that, but I don't think it was put in the report. But we can all assume what that is. So this information that was sent to us, and this is for the benefit of the taxpayers, because this is very misleading. And as Councillor Accioni said, we are all here elected to represent the taxpayers of Woodstock. That is our job, and that is our #1 priority. So this report The financial model that provides background information on the estimated cost for each option was never shared with Woodstock staff. So all this conversation that you've been giving us at this council meeting about all the sharing of information and working together was never shared at any of the technical memos or final reports provided by the consultant. Yet the final report included on the March 23rd County Council agenda includes a financial model and other information that was never sent to our city staff. Our staff now has this information thanks to the County Council agenda, not from Mr. Simpson or the consultant. Our staff have begun analysis of this. You don't have to roll your eyes. You know what? I accept that you treat me terrible at these meetings, but your behavior, Mr. Simpson, to our staff has been atrocious. And this just goes to prove that. Why you would want to take over our water when there is no working relationship at all, and the way that you have behaved and treated our staff is atrocious. I would strongly advise that when this report is written from our staff with the correct information, and that's not fixed to one way or another, that option B would be the option that this council would strongly recommend, that we would take over our water. And we will not have these problems anymore with what's going on right now. Do you know the stress that you have put our staff under? Unnecessary, because this report was unnecessary. It was not asked for, and there was no reason for this. So all the time wasted by county staff and city staff that could have been completely put on something else. So, you know, when you allege the $1 million savings is completely erroneous. We will ask our staff to highlight the numerous errors in this report, and that's what we'll be going for. And I have no questions, just my statement. Thank you.
Councillor Schadenberg.
Yeah, thanks a lot again, Acting Mayor Lauder, to, I guess David Simpson are probably the people who wrote the report from Blue Plan. I was like you looking at comparisons where you're looking at apples versus apples, not apples versus pears, because the one thing about cost per kilometer of water distribution between Oxford and the city of Woodstock, it doesn't matter if it's a brand new subdivision or a subdivision that's been around for 100 years, it better cost us a lot more for getting water to per kilometer based solely on the number of taps and water shutoffs per kilometer. Based on what the county of Oxford has, because let's face it, a lot of people on dirt county roads don't have water distribution. They're still on well water, and the same thing with the wastewater management as well. You would think that the Woodstock is doing an exceptional job if you look at your bar graphs. If your bar graphs are correct on, don't see the page number, it's 44 of the agenda anyway. That the Woodstock is just over 5,000 per kilometer, when the county of Oxford is just under 3,000 per kilometer. But boy, you would think, by looking at the real numbers, apples to apples, I would think the city of Woodstock is doing more than just an exceptional job of delivering water per kilometer to the number of taps they have to per kilometer.
I can certainly speak to that. We'll defer to GM Blue Plan first, and I can jump back on that if you wish.
Sure, through you, Acting Mayor, to Councillor Schadenberg. A few comments. The costing, the operating expenditures, and the presentation was not to indicate who's doing better or worse, but simply to start as a baseline to say, where is the money being spent and how do we evaluate that on an even basis. So the cost per kilometer indicate to us, it gave us some indication of where to start the evaluation to see what types of purchases are being made. The cost per service helps us rule out the influence of having a greater density in the urban areas, and the other water distribution systems that the county does operate does have urban density as well. They're not all rural systems. So both of those together indicated really a ranking or an order of most expensive to least that allowed us to look into it a little bit more to find out, is it purchase services, is it chemicals, is it contractors and such, to follow through with that. We were taking that information to start the evaluation and bring those considerations into those model comparisons. So we wanted to make sure it was stressed that this isn't a who's performing best, but rather where could there be opportunity for improvements that led to those best practices that we identified.
Thank you. Are there any other questions from Councillor Schadenberg? Councillor Accioni?
Yeah, this is more of a statement, and this I'm just going to agree with my fellow Councillor Tate. You know what, Mr. Simpson, I expect the arrogance from you. I do. I've watched enough county council meetings to get that. Okay. What I'm really disappointed in this report is actually through the planners who did this report. I've been told over my 8 years career that be careful, don't let city staff direct reports and everything else. This is the first time that I'm reading a report, and it really looks like Mr. Simpson gave you what the outcome should look like, and you ignored everything else and put everything towards making that look okay in hopes that councillors will just bat an eye and agree with it. This has got to be one of the worst reports I've seen, with so much stuff that hasn't even been touched on, let alone the fact the lack of communication with town of Tillsonburg as well as City of Woodstock with the details is just unbelievable. And I am sorry, but you should be ashamed. You absolutely should be, because this is just so frustrating as a city councillor. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a concern too on the rates and the reserves. The county proposes to consolidate all of the water and wastewater reserves, and they are currently held separately for each system in the county. The stated rationale for this consolidation is to allow the county to fund the peaks and valleys of capital project financing needs and reduce the effort to manage the 15 separate reserves. The monthly bills paid by each Woodstock ratepayer includes the cost to maintain the Woodstock water and wastewater systems. These reserves were in excess of 31 million as of the last rate study in 2020. And when I'm looking at the report that has been given today, it speaks of collapsing water and wastewater reserves is certainly a concern for the citizens of Woodstock, and I have had calls regarding this. This does not include any of the funds held in the development charges reserves to fund water and wastewater system expansion. Systems must each be financially sustainable. This will encourage the expansion of small systems that cannot be financially sustainable. I guess through to Mr. Simpson, why would a Woodstock ratepayer want their monthly bill supporting the maintenance of other systems? Rates are set based on the cost to maintain these systems in a state of good repair. If the reserves are collapsed, are you next planning to propose a harmonization of the monthly water and wastewater costs so that the same charges apply to every customer across the county?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Lauder. Just for clarity, again, the suggestion of consolidating the reserves was a best management practice that was proposed by the consultants. No one at the county has followed up with any inference that the county will be following a similar collapsing of the water and wastewater reserves. So I think just need to read the report closely. It's listed right now as a best management practice. The county's made no recommendation or statement in terms of how that'll be handled going forward.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Councillor Talbot?
Sorry, thank you, Acting Mayor Lauder. And this can go back either to Jim or Andrea, I guess, or even to David for that matter. And sort of following along the lines of Councillor Petter's question about the final decision being made, where it's actually going. I'm wondering that because in the presentation that you gave us today, when you were doing the model comparisons, I don't feel that you gave the status quo plus the same information or the same idea as what you did for A, B, and C. So I think that because you said that there are things in the status quo plus that definitely would improve what's existing right now. But when we look at the comparison charts, that really isn't highlighted as the other three models are. So I think going forward that in order that everything is sort of treated equally, that one, if just so that whether it is the chosen model or not, that it receives the same comparison looking at the in the presentation.
Through Acting Mayor Lauder to Councillor Talbot, certainly we can take that away for consideration. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or concerns? Councillor Accioni?
Yes, thank you. Through to Jim and Andrea. Anything that we talked about today, is your reports going to be adjusted, or is this final reports as far as you guys are concerned to be handed off to Mr. Simpson and do with his biddings as he wishes?
Through you, Acting Mayor, the report had to be finalized because of the funding requirement, so it has been submitted. However, we have discussed this to say absolutely if an amendment or an additional note would be requested by the county to acknowledge the feedback, address the comments that have come in through your council and through Tillsonburg. It can be submitted as an amendment. We wouldn't want to change the report just because we want to keep alignment with what's been submitted to the province, but most certainly want to capture the concerns, how the county wishes to follow through with that.
Go ahead.
If I can continue, then may I request that considerations for like what it's going to do for the city of Woodstock expenses, it's not just the county expenses, be considered, because it's going to be quite significant. If all of a sudden the way Mr. Simpson is presenting or wanting to do this, getting rid of some senior level positions, and that's a lot of expense that nowhere did I see that included in this report at all and being considered to affect that $1 million savings that somehow has showed up.
Through you, Acting Mayor, the scope of our work was meant to cover the broad list of considerations like we presented, and that is included in the report, that there is more homework to do with any of these models to make sure that some of the projected costs are fine-tuned. There are additional studies and or a transition plan that would have to dive into that a little bit more deeply, especially related to staff considerations or changes in organizational structure. The scope of our work and our budget from the RFP couldn't allow us to do that deep of an analysis, nor could we take on the rate impacts related to Oxford customers, Woodstock customers, or Tillsonburg customers specifically, but we considered those costs overall. That was what we were tasked to do.
Tasked by Mr. Simpson, I assume, obviously.
Through you, Acting Mayor, through the request for proposal, so the outlines in the RFP itself.
Well, if you do put all that information together, I think City Council would, Woodstock City Council would greatly appreciate that as being part of the report to go forward to County Council, since Mr. Simpson indicated we're not going to have any say in this at all when it comes to voting for our fellow citizens. Thank you.
Are there any other comments or questions? Thank you for your presentation, and we'll deal with that shortly. The next person delegation is Carl Harris, and I understand that Mr. Harris is not available for his delegation and presentation. So we'll go back to a motion. But I have a motion concerning the joint water and wastewater service delivery review. Councillor Tate. And second by Councillor Accioni.
I'll make the motion that Woodstock City Council refer the presentation regarding joint water and wastewater service delivery review to staff for report and strongly recommend option B.
Thank you. Are there any? Yes, Councillor Tate, go
Yeah,
ahead.
I just want to speak to it. I just want to comment that normally I'm very defensive of staff and the way that we talk to staff and treat staff. In this case, Mr. Simpson has been terrible to our staff, and that's why I called it out. It has been, I think I mentioned it before, it has been very, very hard on our staff, very stressful. It's made for a very awkward working relationship. And I think it needs to stop. And I think it's very important that we stress that we want to take this over. We want this to stop. And we have very good staff. County has very good staff too. I'm not commenting on that. We have a problem with one person, and he's making it unbearable for the rest of our staff. Thank you.
Councillor Petter.
Yes, if I could, through the acting mayor to Councillor Tate, if I could ask her to amend her motion to not do what we are saying the county has done by leaning to one way or the other. Let's just ask our staff to do the report without the recommendation or the tilt toward option B.
Councillor Tate, would you like to make a friendly amendment to that?
Well, because I've sat on county council all these years and I understand the background and everything going forward, I don't think I'm going to change that motion. I understand what you're saying, but there's a lot of history with this. And I believe the CAO, when he was the city engineer, he went to the province and tried to get our water back at that time. I think it's very important, and I think the report will come back that option B is the option, but I think I'm going to leave it in there.
Councillor Petter.
Through the mayor to Councillor Tate again. Well, that's kind of why I think it is going to come back that way too, but I don't want to be accused of doing exactly what we're saying Mr. Simpson did, which leaning one way or the other. So that's why I want to get it out of there. But
okay, I appreciate that. I'll take it out. I'll just have staff do a report, but obviously in my comment strongly support option B.
Councillor Accioni.
I'll second that as well. Yeah, I'll second that.
You agree with?
Yes.
Okay. So do you want
Councillor Petter.
Okay. You want to read the new motion? Just okay. Okay. Councillor Talbot.
Sorry, I can't get my mouse to work. Will the report will include all the financial information as well too? Is that you're looking for a full report, Councillor Tate, so that, I mean, we'll get the whole picture from it?
Staff are well aware of all the information that was missed, and they have it, so we will be getting a full report.
No, this is for us to take over. If option B is the preferred option, it will include the costing that will.
Yeah, staff. Yeah, I'm sure staff. You can ask this. I think you should let the city engineer comment on that, but I'm sure he will.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments? Councillor Schadenberg.
Sorry for putting my hand that close to the screen, Acting Mayor Lauder. I'm just kind of curious when it's all said and done, and maybe the two county councilors can confirm this with me, or even our Acting Mayor Connie Lauder has been going to, of course, the county council meetings as well. Is this report technically kind of out of order anyway because of the fact that the RFP was issued by the engineering department of the County of Oxford and was never really approved as something that was going to be mandated from county council? Yeah, let's go ahead and let's take a look at this review. I mean, later on in this agenda today, we have development charges, which I understand from talking to our CAO is something that we have to look at every 5 years. We have things like recreation needs assessment studies that based on hopefully maybe applying for a grant or something for a recreational facility. We have to do those every 5 or 6 years. There's so many studies and things we really have to do, master plans, feasibility studies, that are all part of governance, and that's what we're here for, is governance. I guess Councillor Tate can answer the question, but I just think when it's all said and done, really, maybe this is just out of order to begin with, coming from the county.
I was just going to say, I think you should refer that to the CAO. He can probably answer that better than I can, if he wants to comment.
Yes, Madam Chair, through to Councillor Schadenberg. I think this particular situation is a little off in the sense that all of the area municipalities in the county had just completed a service delivery review following the regional review of the province. So we had done a coordinated, it was a great partnership working with all of the area municipalities in the county, where we looked at each service that each of us delivers and decided whether or not the services were being delivered at the right level of government. Was there ways to make it more efficient? And with respect to water and sewer, there were a few recommendations, but this was not one of them. And so this is very much an initiative of Mr. Simpson. It was not an initiative that comes out of the report. It is not an initiative of County Council. Mr. Simpson made application for the municipal modernization funding, received funding from the province for the project, and then proceeded to County Council to move forward with this. So this is not something that's come out of a comprehensive review. It's not something that came out of County Council. It is an initiative of Mr. Simpson.
Any other questions through to the CAO or any other discussion? Councillor Accioni.
Thank you. Through the chair, and just more of a comment that I want to apologize to city staff for everything they've been going through. I mean, thank you for putting up with continuing service and everything else, but speaking with a few, I know the stresses they've been feeling, and just know that as councillors, and I hope I speak for all of us, we really do love what you're doing. We don't see the need for this change whatsoever, at least I certainly don't, and really believe it's just more of a fishing expedition by Mr. Simpson and the county here. So just keep doing what you're doing, and thank you very much. And thank you to our city staff for cooperating, and I really look forward to this report. And hopefully the county councillors are watching this right now and realize how the city feels, or at least some of us feel, and really will not vote in favor of any real changes. If they have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion? I will read the motion again, just because there's been discussion, that Woodstock City Council refer the presentation regarding joint water and wastewater service delivery review to staff for a report. Any further discussion? Councillor Schadenberg.
Yes, thanks. Your Mayor, just want to clarify, is there any timeline that is necessary for this based on going back to county council agendas? Should we be looking at the next council meeting to get some sort of a report from the city engineering office? You're on mute, Connie.
Yeah, the CAO, would you like to speak to that, or Mr. Dahan from engineering regarding the timeline?
Your worship, through the councillor, staff will be working on a response to this presentation. Well, I think we're going to target for the next council meeting. Otherwise, I think we still have time to make it to the first one in May, if that's not possible.
Any other questions? Okay. I'll Call the vote. All in favor of the resolution? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we'll go on now. The correspondence. There's a correspondence from the Oxford County 2024 Oxford County Water and Wastewater Master Plan Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Study Notice of Study Commencement. But I have a motion, Councillor Tate, and second by Councillor Accioni. Is there any discussion on that, the correspondence?
Sorry, I'll make the motion to receive his information.
Oh, yes. All in favor? Thank you. The next piece of correspondence is Oxford County 2024 Transportation Master Plan Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Study, Phase 1 and 2, Notice of Study Commencement. Could I have the motion on that item? Councillor Accioni, and second by Councillor Tate. Go ahead with the motion, please.
Thank you. Move by myself, the Woodstock City Council received the report regarding the 2024 Transportation Master Plan Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Study.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on that? I'll call the vote on that. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Going on, the Woodstock Truck Show, May 28th, 2022, request for in-kind support. Councillor Accioni. And the seconder, Councillor Petter. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you. Move by myself, the Woodstock City Council support the in-kind request from the Woodstock Truck Show for an event being held on May 28th, 2022.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. The next one is the Woodstock Oxford Rotary Fish Fry, May the 7th, 2022. Request for the use of the portable stage. Councillor Schattenberg and Councillor Petter. Go ahead with the motion, please.
Sure, the Woodstock City Council support the in-kind request from Woodstock Oxford Rotary for the use of the portable stage for the event being held on May 7th, 2022.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councillor Schattenberg?
Yeah, asking this question, I guess, through to the, I would think the stage belongs to the Parks Department, so maybe it's to Brian Connors. Would staff be required to assist in assembling the stage for and with the Woodstock Oxford Rotary Club? The reason I asked that question, I was involved in the Relay for Life for 8 or 10 years. And on that committee, I helped put together the stage, but there were certainly city staffers on hand as well for that. So I wanted to just clarify that for that, because obviously there's pay involved with that as well, not just the use of the stage.
Acting Mayor Lauder, through to the councilor's question. Yes, staff will be there. We want to make sure that the stage is put together correctly, so there's no incidents or accidents. So they will, when you get the stage set up for this one-time event, there will be staff to set it up and take it down.
Thanks, Mr. Connors, and I can attest that it can be tricky, especially when you try to figure out exactly where the stairs should go on that stage when you assemble it, and of course the railings for the stage, and the big screw things that tighten every section up as you go along. But it's a good process, and it's a good idea to help support the Rotary Club.
Thank you. You've heard the motion. Everyone in favor of the motion? Thank you. That's unanimous. Our next item is Hempson Consulting Limited regarding development charge study. Andrea Marabella, Daniela Tavoli, and Julia Zaraki. Go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Andrea Marabella, Senior Consultant at Hempson. as mentioned by the acting mayor, Lauder, both Danielle and Julia are also with me as well here today. So this meeting is really intended as a council information session to inform council of the development charge study process that is currently underway with city staff. I believe City Engineer Harold has provided a staff report to supplement my presentation. I do have 15 slides that I will run through to provide that overview, and I'll just share my screen. See that. Thumbs up if everyone can see the screen. All right, great. So a couple of things that we want to discuss today. We'll provide an overview of the development forecast that we're using for the purposes of our DC calculations. I'll provide a very high level overview of the development related capital program in which the projects that are being informed and used into the calculation of the rates. Then we'll summarize what those calculated rates are for development charges and the comparison of what the current rates are relative to the calculated, as well as some comparison with some other neighboring municipalities. And I'll cap off with some implementation options and policy considerations, which the city will be expected to make some decisions on, not necessarily today, but certainly in the near future as we move through the public consultation process and through the bylaw passage. So maybe just to provide a bit of an overview here, council passed the development charge bylaw that currently is in place on June 7th of 2018 for a range of services from parks and recreation to transit, police, fire, library. So certainly all the range of service which are eligible for DC recovery. The city is looking to pass a new bylaw now. And in order to pass a new bylaw, two things really need to be done. First, we have to prepare a development charge background study. Second to that, we have to hold a statutory public meeting, at which point council can pass a new bylaw, which would set the stage for that bylaw to be in existence for the next 5 years. Your current bylaw actually expires on June 6th of 2023, so there is a little bit of time before your bylaw expires. However, there's been a series of legislative changes that have occurred over the last number of years, which have prompted really this review. And second to that, as you probably have noticed, the municipal costs of tenders and prices have certainly been increasing. Your level of growth has also changed. So that really prompted an early update to the review, which is not too far ahead of schedule, but it is about a year by the time we're all said and done from your existing bylaw expiry. So just to kind of give you a bit of an overview of the study process that we look at, we start off with the development forecast, looking at the amount, type, and location of development. We have to calculate DCs in accordance with the average 10-year level of service that's been provided. So that really sets the stage for the maximum amount that we can collect from on a forthcoming planning period. So we do a very detailed analysis with staff on what those service levels are on a service area basis. Then we look at what infrastructure is required in order to service the development that's going to be occurring. And that capital infrastructure needs identified. And there's a series of legislative deductions that need to be made on a case-by-case basis relative to the project and some of the reserve funds that are in hand. If there's any grants or subsidies that are going to be coming in to offset those project costs, or if there's any shares of projects that may benefit existing development or replacing a piece of infrastructure that's already in existence. So there's some requirements under the act that we have to take into consideration. Once those are made, we have our costs which are eligible for DC recovery. And then those costs are really delineated between your residential and your non-residential sector. Residentially, the charges are on a per unit basis. Non-residentially, the charges are on a per square foot or per square meter basis of gross floor area. So just to provide a bit of an overview of the development forecast, the graph here really just tracks the trend of census population, occupied households, and place of work employment from 2011 through to our 10-year forecast period, which is in 2031. We see here that the city has obviously certainly grown over the last 10 years, and we are anticipating to see a continued projection of a pretty high growth over the forthcoming planning period. City reaching about 53,000 people by 2031 with about 22,000 occupied households. So kind of continuing the trend line, I would say, of what we're seeing from the last 5 years of your census period in terms of household growth. which has certainly been higher than the preceding period from 2011 to 2016. So definitely keeping on along that line of a higher growth and what we're anticipating to see from the development application that are in line. And this has been informed by Hemson's growth report that we did for the county back in 2020, so a few years ago, and obviously adjusted for some of the new census data that has been released. So then we kind of get into the next key input into our calculation itself is our capital program summary. And I'll take you through what these columns mean. On the far left, we have the service area and the service categories to which we are calculating a development charge for. So it starts from library services all the way down to roads and related. The next column is our net municipal cost, and that's the gross cost of the program, net of any grants or subsidies that might be anticipated over the planning period. And overall, our program is about $87.8 million. When you think about that program, you'll kind of see it being really delineated and kind of absorbed by a few key service areas. Parks and Recreation is about 50% of that number. Library services represents about 10.8 million, and your roads and related service category represents about $17 million of that total. The next share or total column there is your replacement and benefit to existing column, which is about $19.3 million. That's an important column because that represents the share of funding that cannot be included for recovery from development charges. So that has to be supplemented by another funding source, which for the most of these services is going to be your taxes and your user fees. We have available DC reserves, which are on hand, about $11.2 million. And those reserves are applied to the projects occurring first. So certainly in areas like Parks and Recreation, there's fairly healthy reserve funds on hand, and we are absorbing those reserves in the calculation of the rate. And then the second last column is our post-2031 benefit or our other development-related share, which is a program or share of the program that is still related to development and can be funded from development charges or other growth funding tools. But due to service level restrictions, those costs are not being considered in the calculation of the rate in this planning period and in this bylaw. They will be considered in subsequent studies, whether it be through DCs or if the city decides to implement the CBC, a community benefit charge bylaw, those funds can be absorbed or tied to that funding tool. The far column on the right is our total cost eligible for recovery, and that's the amount that actually gets brought into the calculation of the development charge rate. And that is $48.3 million, which is obviously when we started off with our cost of $87.8 million, after those deductions that I talked about, we have a reduced share that's included in the calculation of the rate under the Act. And then when we break down that $48.3 million, again, just under half is related to your Parks and Recreation component. And then we have your roads and related representing the next largest share of that. And that's important because when we get to the next slide, when I show you the calculated rates, you'll see how that funding goes to the different buckets of where the DCs are being collected from. So the next slide here, we have the calculated rates themselves. The charges, as I mentioned, are differentiated by dwelling unit type. And this is obviously just looking at the citywide component here and not taking into consideration the DCs that would be applied at the county level. For a single and semi-detached unit, the single rate is $15,174 to be calculated at, and the bedroom rate with a one-bedroom apartment is $6,907. The pie graph on the left looks at, so of that $15,174 for a single and semi-detached unit, where does that money go on a service area basis? And that really distributes how those funds are going to be collected. And about 50% goes to your Parks and Recreation service category. Roads and related represents another 23%. So of those two components, your roads and your rec is really comprising about 75% of the total rate here, and then the residual funds go to the various different service categories that we have listed. So your next question might be, well, how does that compare to the rates that we currently have in force? The current charges for a residential single detached dwelling unit in the city of Woodstock, taking into consideration the recent index, is $10,833 for a single unit. We've calculated a rate of $15,174. So it's about a $4,341 increase on a per unit basis for a single detached dwelling unit. And what we see here in terms of the difference of the charges, what's driving the rates, certainly the two categories of parks and recreation and roads and related in terms of the quantum of the charge, those are the two service categories that are seen from a dollar perspective, a bigger increase. And then your library services as well is going up about $481 from the current rate that's in force. So next to that is in terms of some comparisons to other communities, both in Oxford County, as well as some other municipalities around you. We did provide a bit of a comparison here. The current rates in the city of Woodstock, which include the upper tier charges, the local ones, then we've included the water and wastewater component of the development charge, which is considered the ASDC component, the area specific. Your current rates are kind of on the low to mid on the spectrum. With the calculated rates, the maximum permissible rates, it would bring you up a couple spots on the list, but still very competitive with other communities, much less than what we would see in Brantford, London, or any of the region of Waterloo communities. And we put Cambridge up there as an example. So you continue to be in the mix in terms of the grand scheme of the total charges relative to other communities for a single detached unit. So that's on the residential side. I'll take a few slides here just to talk about the non-residential calculations itself. These look at the non-residential rates on a citywide basis. The rates are differentiated between non-industrial and industrial. The non-industrial charge, which is largely going to be your commercial and retail related type developments, which is going to be $36.37 a square meter. The industrial charge is $20.74 a square meter. I will note that presently your industrial development charge is currently exempt from the payment of DCs, but these are the fully calculated rates if the city wishes to choose to implement them. That would be the rate that you could go forward with. The pie graph here on the left looks at the non-industrial charge in terms of the weighting of it between your roads and related is the largest single category here to which that non-residential, non-industrial charge is being collected for. So just comparing your current non-resident, non-industrial rates to the calculated ones, we're seeing an increase here of about $11.28 over the current charge of $25.09, which is currently in place. The one thing you might notice here, and most of the rate increase is being directly driven by your roads and related component. Parks and recreation, which was a driving factor on the residential side, and library isn't a factor on the non-residential component. We feel that those two service categories are directly driven by residential development, so they don't attract the non-residential development charge to it. So that's why those are zeroed out in the purposes of this comparison. So just to kind of compare the commercial rates here, the non-industrial from relative to other communities as well. The current rates in Woodstock would be on the mid to low end of the spectrum. And with the calculated rates would obviously put you higher than your current rates, but still less than Tavistock, and it hasn't moved you in a relative position to other communities from a rate comparison perspective. I have prepared on the next slide a comparison of the development charges for industrial development, recognizing that you currently don't levy industrial development charges, and as well as that, the county matches that and does not have an industrial development charge in place either. So currently they would be $0 at any industrial development that would come into play. The city of Woodstock, if you were to implement an industrial development charge, would certainly put you at least in the mix of some other communities that do levy industrial. But as you'll see, there are still a number of communities that don't have an industrial development charge that's in place, and certainly the other ones in Oxford County, such as Tillsonburg and Norwich and Ingersoll, both waived at both at the county and the lower tier level. So just to kind of run through some implementation options and policy considerations that we may need to consider over the next couple months. So council has the authority to implement the maximum permissible rate that we've calculated, or a development charge rate that's lower than the maximum allowable rate. Development charges can also be phased in over the life of the bylaw. I will point out that part of the legislative changes that came into effect specifically section 26.1 and 26.2 of the Act, provide for more rate stability and predictability within the development charge regime, meaning that developers can lock in rates at their current rates and pay them at a later time. So any phase-in schedule or discount that would be in place would prolong that phase-in and discount over a much longer period than might be intended, at least by the time of the bylaw, because of the built-in legislation on the freezing of the rates. And then I guess my last point here is just important to consider that anytime we make a reduction or discount to the rates or an exemption, those lost revenues need to be made up from other sources, which in this case is going to be your property taxes. Any foregone DC revenue cannot be made up by ways of higher DCs. So we can't shift the burden of exempting industrial and putting that on the residential sector, or reducing the residential rates and putting it on the commercial sector. Some of those cross subsidizations are not allowed for under the Act, and we have to be careful on how we do that. I will stop after this slide before we get to the next steps here. There is just one other point that I wanted to bring up is our DC policies for consideration here. The current DC bylaw provides for a series of exemptions, industrial and institutional development, places of worship, affordable housing, your downtown CIP areas, and public hospitals. City Council will have to determine if the existing list of exemptions will be modified or maintained in this next bylaw for passage. We will have to make some modifications to your bylaw to reflect those new legislative changes as it relates to the section 26.1 and 26.2, as well as the intensification of your existing units for secondary suites. And then we are proceeding on the basis that the citywide route is most applicable for all your eligible services, and those will continue to be calculated on a uniform basis consistent with your current practice. So that really kind of caps off my presentation here, just so you are aware of the next steps. They're flashed on the screen here. We're here today to do obviously this information session. We will be looking to prepare a DC background study, which will be made available for public consultation next week on April 14th. Once that background study is made public, we will proceed with the steps of holding a statutory public meeting at a regular council meeting on May 19th. And then we're looking to pass a new bylaw on June 16th of 2022. And through that period, if additional information sessions with council are required, we will be happy to coordinate that with city staff to answer any questions you may have. So that was as quick as I can go through this material, but I will be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Are there any questions from council members at this time? Councilor Schadenberg.
Yeah, thanks. From our chair through to Mr. Mirabella from Hempson. You had the one page number 6 graph that said what development charges, sort of the calculated maximum use of them, and a lot of the percentages. For example, Parks and Recreation at 51%. Is that something that is sort of dictated by our current bylaw? Is that something suggested by Hempson? Is it something that's maybe dictated by the province of Ontario? Who comes up with some of these numbers and percentages for what these dollars can be used for?
So through the mayor, the percentages that's related to the calculation of the rate is a direct relationship to the capital projects that we're going to be funding through this DC study. So on the previous slide, we identified over 22 million or around $22 million in eligible expenses for Parks and Recreation. And that's really what's driving the recovery related to the rate itself. So there's a correlation between the infrastructure that's needed, and that's determined by city staff through your master plans and through discussions with council and your budget, and then that makes its way into the calculation of the rate.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, thank you for your extensive report, and we'll be dealing with this a little bit later. So thanks.
Thank you.
So moving on, there's no mayor's report and there's no council reports. So we go ahead with the administrative services reports. And the first one is the court security and prisoner transportation agreement. Councillor Tate and Councillor Talbot. Second.
I'll make the motion that Woodstock City Council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an agreement with Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Ontario as represented by the Solicitor General for Court Security and Prisoner Transportation.
Are there any questions on that? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And the next one is tender awards. And could I have a motion, Councillor Talbot, and seconder, Councillor Schadenberg?
Thank you. I'll move that Woodstock City Council receive the 2021 tender awards report as information.
Thank you. Any questions on that? Okay, all in favor of the motion? Thank you. That's unanimous. The next one is a report on the reserve and reserve funds and additional capital projects. Motion for that, Councillor Petter, and a seconder, Councillor Accioni. Thank you. Are there any questions on that report? Oh, I'm sorry. Read the motion. I'm sorry.
Am I too slow for you, Mayor, or what? Okay, where am I? I move that Woodstock City Council receive the statement of reserve and reserve funds at December 31st, 2021 as information.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Great, it's a great report. So we'll just move on here. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. The next item is authorization of a tax arrears extension agreement, 139 Light Street. Could I have a motion on that, please? Councillor Accioni, a second. Councillor Schadenberg, go ahead with the motion, please.
Thank you. I move that Woodstock City Council authorize the Director of Administrative Services to sign an extension agreement for the property at 139 Light Street, Woodstock, Ontario, with Mr. Olive Wayne.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And the next one is another authorization of a tax arrears extension agreement for 509 Admiral Street. Councillor Schadenberg, seconder. Councillor Talbot, go ahead.
Woodstock City Council authorized the Director of Administrative Services to sign an extension agreement for the property at 509 Admiral Street, Woodstock, Ontario, with Mr. Michael Goodsman.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. I'll call the vote on that. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. The next one, again, authorization of a tax arrears extension agreement for 215 Wellington Street North. Could I have a motion? Councillor Talbot and a seconder. Councillor Schadenberg, go ahead with the motion.
I'll move that Woodstock City Council authorize the Director of Administrative Services be authorized to sign an extension agreement for the property at 215 Wellington Street North, Woodstock, Ontario, with Mr. Michael Goodson.
Thank you. Are there any questions or discussion? Thank you. We'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And one more. Authorization of a tax arrears extension agreement at 563 Dundas. Councillor Talbot and a seconder, Councillor Petter. Go ahead, Councillor Talbot.
Thank you. I'll move that Woodstock City Council authorize the Director of Administrative Services to sign an extension agreement for the property at 563 Dundas Street, Woodstock, Ontario, with Ms. Marilyn Nutt.
Thank you. Any questions? Thank you. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And now we'll move on to the engineering development charges. But I have the motion, please. Councillor Tate and Councillor Petter, second. Go ahead, Councillor Tate.
Woodstock City Council received the draft development charges study results as presented for information, instruct staff to proceed in drafting the development charges background study / report and associated DC bylaw. And further that City Council instructs staff to advertise and hold a public meeting on May 19th, 2022 to receive public comments on the draft development charges background study. And further that City Council instructs staff to finalize development charges background study and report to council for approval and pass the DC bylaw.
Thank you. Are there any discussions on that one or questions? Hearing none, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Now we go to the Parks and Recreation on the Parks Assistant Supervisor, Sports Field Turf. Councillor Accioni and second by Councillor Schadenberg. Go ahead, Councillor Accioni.
Thank you. Moved by myself, the Woodstock City Council provides authorization that this 9-month Parks Assistant Supervisor position move to a 12-month position.
Thank you. Are there any questions on that? Councillor Schadenberg.
Thanks, Mayor. Through to Brian Connors, our Director of Parks and Recreation. Just want to, I guess maybe for the public as much as anything else, to explain how this job shifting is happening and why.
Through to Acting Mayor Lauder, through to the councilor's question. Right now, Parks is divided into 3 areas: horticulture, forestry, and sports, field and turf maintenance. Due to the number of projects, as far as redevelopment, the number of staff, and the adoption now of cow and turf, we feel that it's appropriate to have an assistant supervisor, instead of going for 9 months, go for the full year, because there is work and staff that require it.
Any other questions? I'll call the vote on that. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. The next one is the sale of land. Proposed sale of city-owned industrial land to 1185581 Canada Inc. Could I have a motion, please? Councillor Talbot and second by Councillor Petter.
Thank you. I'll move that. Sorry, I'll move that Woodstock City Council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an agreement of purchase and sale with proponents of 1185551 Canada Inc. and that the necessary bylaw be read.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And another sale, which is proposed sale of city-owned industrial land jointly to 2117846 Ontario Inc. and 2608150 Ontario Inc. Motion, Councillor Petter, and a seconder. Councillor Talbot. Go ahead, Councillor Petter.
I move that Woodstock City Council authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an agreement of purchase and sale with the proponents of 2117846 Ontario Inc. and 2608150 Ontario Inc. and that the necessary bylaw be read.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Hearing none, call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And the next one is the electronic, hybrid, and in-person meetings. Could I have a motion on this, please? Councillor Tate. And a seconder, please. Oh, pardon. Okay. Councillor Tate, would you go ahead with the motion and then we'll get the seconder after you've made the motion?
Woodstock City Council supports the transition to hybrid council meetings with an anticipated implementation date of May 19th, 2022. And further, that City Council approves option 1 with respect to regular council meeting times. And further, that City Council supports the return to in-person Committee of Adjustment Planning meetings effective May 16th, 2022, with meetings of adjustment meetings being held at 6 p.m. and planning meetings being held at 7 p.m. But I don't know how to word this. The option 1 takes effect after the election and status quo until such time. If I can get a seconder. For times.
Could I have a seconder on that, please? The motion, Councillor Schattenberg. And now for discussion, or would you like that to go to the clerk? Councillor Tate?
In case I didn't word that properly, so what I was thinking was we would leave the time status quo as is until the election, then after the election, it goes back to the evening meetings. And the reason for that was I didn't want to have anybody that wants to run for the election. I didn't want to have that we have just day meetings because then it disqualifies a lot of people to run. And I think it's important for delegations that they are able to attend. And I think it's harder during the day. I really enjoy the day meetings, but I think it's very difficult for business people to attend. And I think that's important.
Thank you. Would you like to hear from the clerk regarding this motion? Yeah.
Got it? Okay. There we go. Thank you, Madam Chair, through to Councillor Tate. So what I've included then in the second paragraph of that motion, just to make sure that I've got accurately represented what you're looking for, is further that City Council approves option 1 with respect to regular council meeting times to take effect with the new term of council and continue with 1:30 p.m. meetings until that time. That'd be accurate. Okay.
Is that everything there okay with that, Councillor Tate? The motion? Okay. Any other discussion? Councillor Accioni?
Yeah, through the chair to, I suppose, Ms. Humphreys. So if I'm understanding this, the way it's presented right now, we'll stick with 1:30s, but the new council 7 p.m. meeting starting after next term, just to be 100% sure that's what we're voting on here. Is that correct? Through to Ms. Humphreys.
Okay.
Yeah.
I have the answer from Ms. Humphreys. And yes, we would continue with the meetings 1:30 from now through till November 15th. And when the new council will take over, and then the meetings will go back to 7 o'clock.
Okay, thank you.
Or they can ask the staff to bring a report to keep it status quo at that time, or whatever they would like at that time. Any other questions or clarification? Okay, I'll call the vote. All in favor of that resolution? Thank you. That's unanimous. So there's nothing from the Chief Administrative Officer, nothing from Human Resources, the Fire Services. The review of the Municipal Code Chapter 802 Consumer Fireworks. Could I have a motion on that? Councillor Petter and a seconder. Councillor Schattenberg. Go ahead, Councillor Petter.
Yeah, I move that Woodstock City Council refer the changes to Municipal Code Chapter 802 fireworks to the bylaws section of the agenda. And further, that City Council approves the short form wording and set fine submission as listed in Appendix A. And further, that City Council authorizes the Deputy City Clerk to make the necessary application to the Ministry of the Attorney General to seek approval for the proposed short form wording and set fines changes associated with Municipal Code Chapter 802 fireworks.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? Councillor Schattenberg.
Thanks a lot, Acting Mayor Lauder. I think maybe the most important concept in the entire fireworks report is that there's supposed to be signage now inside each establishment that is selling fireworks to say specifically which dates you're allowed to set off fireworks. And I think that's been part of the problem in the past where people think that just because it's fireworks on July 1st, things that they can do it on June 29th, June 30th, and July 2nd as well, depending on whether or not it's a long weekend. And that's simply wrong. July 1st is the fireworks, and the signage inside establishments, I think, has to be very large and very predominant, and that's the way it's stated in the bylaw.
Thank you. Is there any other questions? I see Fire Chief Jeff Slager is on the line here also. Would you like to speak to the changes that were made?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to the councillor. So when we did the review of the bylaw, with everything being brought forward, we did an in-depth look at neighboring areas, what other fireworks bylaws would have been out and about, and what would have fit the bill at the direction of council for the changes that were requested for there. I think we've done a very good job of kind of addressing a number of the concerns that were brought forward by the members of the public to that area. One of the largest challenges we are going to have is the enforcement aspect of it for it. And we are working internally to develop ways of how we can address that across all three enforcement agencies, police, fire, and bylaw. Some of the notifications requirements, as Councillor Schadenberg noted there, pushing it on that so people are a bit more aware of the information and of the bylaw itself, of dates specifically. We've included that. We are also, our prevention team here is working on a multicultural and multi-language documentation or advertisement as well of this new information to coincide with the growth of the city of Woodstock and the multiculturalism that we are experiencing here, so that everybody's able to understand the directions in that for it. We did make a significant change, I found, with the dates. If council chooses to add or remove special dates for fireworks, it's going to be much easier for us to amend the bylaw in the future for that. But I think we've satisfactorily hit all the areas that concern that were brought forward by the members of the public, and hopefully we can put them into play and move forward.
Thank you. Are there any questions through to Chief Slager? Councillor Talbot?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Lauder, through to the chief. Just out of curiosity, because one of the biggest complaints was people laying them off and then not cleaning up after them and damage being done. So how do you monitor that? Like what if someone just goes out, sets them off and walks away and nobody's around to see them? Like there's no policing, I guess. How do we just hope it doesn't happen, or?
Acting Mayor, through to Councillor Talbot. Unfortunately, that is something that is a play with basically any bylaw or any law. It's kind of that whole, if a tree falls in the forest, does anybody hear it? If something occurs, and unfortunately our Parks Department comes across the damage or the work the day after, and we have no evidence to be able to support charges on a specific individual or individuals who caused that or left the mess, it does add to the challenge of enforcement. This is why this is the type of bylaw similar to our open air burn one, is very complaint based. So if there are things that are going on, if people do see this, not just them setting them off, but people leaving a site in a worse condition than it was there, as the bylaw addresses, it needs to be returned to its previous state. If they know who they are, if they've got that evidence and they're able to provide that for the enforcement agencies, we can utilize that as part of an investigation to move forward or establish whether charges are warranted.
Okay, so let's say someone went out with their camera or like their phone and took a picture, and they could provide that after calling you if when the authorities arrived, and they could say, well, I can show you who was doing it because the picture from a phone will show the time and location, I guess.
You're Acting Mayor, through to Councillor Talbot. We would be collecting that information and then utilizing that based on the nature of the evidence that's presented to us. We'd have discussions with our solicitors as to what is. We don't want to issue a charge that's not adequately supported. There's nothing worse than having somebody go through the process of having to appear before a justice of the peace to have something thrown out because of insufficient evidence. We would take all precautions and all steps to ensure that what we have supports a charge. Anything that we receive from the members of the public, again, is able to provide that for us. It would become a piece of the investigation into it. It may not be the only item.
Okay, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Thank you. I'll call the vote on that motion. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. Going forward is the purchase of Fleet 2022 Equipment 0010 1-2022 articulating four-wheel drive front end loader, Public Works Department. Could I have a motion on that, please? Councillor Talbot and a second, Councillor Schadenberg. Go ahead.
I'll move that Woodstock City Council approve $33,000 additional funding to be taken from the Equipment Reserve Fund for the purchase of one 2022 articulating four-wheel drive front end loader with a 3 cubic yard bucket and a front plow and side wing plow from Brandt Tractor.
Thank you. Is there any discussion on that? If not, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And the next one is the Fleet 2022 Equipment 0001 2 2022 regular cab pickup trucks, Parks Department. Motion on that, please. Councillor Petter and a seconder. Councillor Tate. Go
I
ahead.
move that Woodstock City Council award the tender for the purchase of two 2022 regular cab pickup trucks from Mohawk Ford Sales Limited, and further that council approve the additional funds of $5,000 for outfitting to be funded from the reserve for replacement of equipment.
Thank you. Are there any questions? If not, I'll call the vote. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And the next is a special committee and advisor task force, which is the Legacy Fund for the commemoration of the Florence Carlyle. Could I have a motion on that one? Councillor Accioni and a seconder. Councillor Petter. Go ahead, Councillor Accioni.
Thank you. Move that Woodstock City Council approve the Woodstock Art Gallery Advisory Board request to draw $50,000 from account 0180-52004-0525- Art Acquisition Reserve Fund to fund 50% of the cost of the overall project to commission a public artwork to commemorate the life and work of artist Florence Carlyle, 1864 to 1923.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Could I have Ms. Reed speak to this resolution?
Thank you very much, Acting Mayor Lauder. So we're following the same process that we're doing for the Bruce Flowers Public Art Commission. Again, this work will become part of the gallery's permanent collection. So this is what the art acquisitions funds are used for. And this will just be an appropriate way to acknowledge the life and work of Florence Carlyle. So I'm pretty excited about it. If we're not successful with the grant, we will not be expending the funds, but I have a strong feeling that we will be.
Thank you. Are there any questions through to Ms. Reed? Thank you. I'll call the motion. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. And moving on, the new business, the following motion has been put forth by Councillor Tate. Would you like to go ahead with your motion?
Yeah, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Schadenberg. Whereas Oxford County was required to complete a review of regional council composition following the regular election 2018, and whereas such review must either affirm the current council composition or change the number of members of its council that represent the lower tier municipalities, and whereas any affirmation of the status quo or change in the number of members that represent the lower tier municipality must be supported through a triple majority approval that includes Oxford County Council and its area municipal councils. And whereas Oxford County Council advanced the status quo option through the triple majority approval process, and this option failed to achieve triple majority support. And whereas Ingersoll Town Council advanced a weighted voting system option through the triple majority approval process, and this option failed to achieve triple majority support. And whereas the Municipal Act requires the County Council to complete this review with triple majority support within 2 years commencing the day the new County Council was organized in 2018, and whereas the County Council has not complied with this requirement, and whereas the Municipal Act prescribes that the Minister may make a regulation changing the composition of county council if the regional municipality fails to comply with this requirement only after the expiration of the 2-year period, but before the year of the next regular election after the regional municipality has a duty to conduct a review. And whereas the minister, in recognition of non-compliance to this requirement, has encouraged Oxford County Council to continue working to reach a local consensus for this composition of its council. And whereas the authority under the Municipal Act for the minister to make a regulation changing the composition of county council for the 2018 term of council has expired. And whereas the Municipal Act does not require another review of county council composition till the next regular election in 2026. And whereas the Municipal Act requires any regulation made by the minister to change the composition of county council to have regard to the principle of representation by population. And whereas Census 2021 reveals that the current county council composition does not have regard to the principle of representation by population, with one county councilor representing a population as few as 7,600, and another county councilor representing a population of 18,600. And whereas for further information, the population representation per county councilor for each lower tier municipality in Oxford County is as follows. Town of Ingersoll, 18,615, City of Woodstock, 15,568, Town of Ingersoll, 13,693, Township of Norwich, 11,151, Township of Zora, 8,628, Township of East Zora Tavistock, 7,841, Township of Southwest Oxford, 7,583. And whereas population forecasts indicate that this disparity in representation will be further eroded with the release of Census 2026 and the next required review of county council composition in 2026. And whereas the next opportunity for the minister to make a regulation respecting county council composition will be 2028. And whereas the failure to comply with the requirement to complete a review of county council composition in the 2018 term of council should not result in the county council being able to prolong this review as the next deadline in which the minister may make a regulation respecting county council composition will be in 2028. And whereas the province has declined to release the recommendations from the regional review and that these recommendations could assist with the development of a local resolution to county council composition, and now therefore it be resolved that the Woodstock City Council requests that the province impose a deadline for county council to complete a review of county council composition that is supported by a triple majority no later than 2 years from the date that the new council is organized in 2022. And further, that the City Council, Woodstock City Council requests that the province release the recommendation of the regional government review as it relates to Oxford County. And further, that this resolution be circulated to the Honorable Doug Ford, Premier of Ontario, the Honorable Steve Clark, Minister of Municipal Affairs and Housing, the Honorable Ernie Hardeman, Oxford MPP, the County of Oxford, and all lower tier municipalities in the County of Oxford.
Thank you. Are there any questions through to Councillor Tate regarding this motion?
I just want to speak to the reason I brought the motion forward is I think it speaks for itself. This should have been dealt with and it wasn't. And I've repeated this over and over, we are paying for 40% of everything that is passed over there. And if anybody's been following county councilor, I'm sure Councillor Schattenberg and Councillor Accioni have been following what's been going on. It's very important that we have the votes and we are not represented by the population. It should have been dealt with. And I know our CAO tried to have it dealt with and it hasn't. So it's come to this, we have to send a motion and get it looked after because our number one priority are the taxpayers of Woodstock and they are not getting represented as they should with the amount of money that they are paying.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
Sorry, I'll have a recorded vote too, please. Sorry.
Okay. Councillor Accioni.
Thank you. Through the chair to Councillor Tate. Just want to say thank you for bringing this up. Today's meeting is a prime example where it's important, where Councillor Petter actually asked point blank, and we are not going to get the true representation for the citizens of Woodstock. So thank you for this, and hopefully it is heard and dealt with soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, I'll go ahead and call the vote. Oh, sorry, did Councillor Schadenberg, did you have, sorry, go ahead.
Yes, just maybe a comment, Acting Mayor Lauder. I guess the comment being is we start looking at the makeup of the townships and particularly, but also the town of Tillsonburg with a population of well over 18,000 and the sort of low population of so many other townships that you sometimes get frustrated when you start looking at even taxation levels versus what the people in the city of Woodstock are paying for the services they receive from the county of Oxford. And you can't shuffle all the decks overnight, but you certainly can try to fix representation somehow possibly and or to at least have it looked at very seriously. And I do think there's a connection, in my opinion, too, to taxation levels too in some of the townships as to what they're paying for the services and than what we're receiving. But I think at this point in time, we definitely have to look at the representation at the council, both for the city of Woodstock and I would throw town of Tillsonburg into that mix as well. Thanks.
Yeah, any further discussion? I'll turn the voting over to our clerk. Just a minute.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Lauder. There we go. Okay, I think we got it. Thank you. Acting Mayor Lauder, if it's okay with council, I will not reread the motion. It's quite lengthy, but it is printed on the agenda. So if that's okay, I'll just go ahead and take the vote. Councillor Tate.
Yes.
Councillor Talbot.
Yes.
Councillor Accioni.
Yes.
Acting Mayor Lauder.
Yes.
Councillor Petter.
Yes.
And Councillor Schadenberg.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carries unanimously. If you could just give us one moment. Acting Mayor Lauder is having a few technical difficulties.
Okay, Jerry, this is where you sing again. Musical interlude.
If anybody heard the dog in the background, he was singing.
I gotta turn myself.
Okay. Okay. So you got it. Yeah. Sorry about that. Well, if we did that vote was unanimous. The vote on that resolution was unanimous. So we'll move on to draft bylaws. Councillor Tate,
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Petter, that the following bylaws be given a first and second reading. 9520-22, a bylaw to repeal and replace the City of Woodstock 149 Municipal Code Chapter 802 fireworks. 9521-22, a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to sign an agreement between Her Majesty the Queen and Right of Ontario, represented by the Solicitor General of the Province of Ontario for court security and prisoner transportation. 9522-22, a bylaw to provide for the sale of certain lands owned by the 171 Corporation of the City of Woodstock to 118-55581 Canada Inc. And 9523-22, a bylaw to provide for the sale of certain lands owned by the Corporation of the City of Woodstock to 2117846 Ontario Inc. and 2608150 Ontario Inc.
thank you. All in favor of those motions? Thank you. That's unanimous. The third reading, please.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Petter, that the following bylaws be given a third and final reading. 9521-22, inclusive to 9523-22.
Thank you. All in favor? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we'll go to the questions and addressed by the members of council. Councillor Talbot first.
It's been a long meeting, so I'll keep it short. Just wishing everyone a happy Easter and then hopefully enjoy some nice weather.
Councillor Tate.
Yeah, I'll just keep it short. I just want to thank everybody for supporting my motion. I did a recorded vote because I think it was really important that it showed that it was unanimous to the rest of the council and to county. And enjoy the weekend. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Petter.
I'll ditto the other two. Happy Easter or Merry Easter, whatever it's called. Be careful with the little kids. The weather's going to be good. They'll be out there running around with the new bikes and everything. So please be careful. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Councillor Schattenberg.
Thanks a lot. I will also mention Easter, but just a reminder, the City of Woodstock Easter egg hunt is back, and it's on Saturday, April 16th at 10:30 a.m. The place to be with your kids between the ages of 2 and 11 is the Victoria Park in Woodstock. And there's nice big posters on the back of the What's on Woodstock magazine with the big recycling picture on the front. First, remember that the recycling and garbage routes changed this past Monday, April the 4th. I do want to mention that I'm wearing a green shirt today. It's in honor of a Green Shirt Day, which is all about transplants, and to make sure that you're registered under beadonor.ca online is the best way to make sure you're part of that program nowadays. And one last thing to mention, the sports report, just for Mr. Petter here. Not sure if his son Lee ever played high school basketball or not. I imagine he probably did. But today is at WCI is the Captain's Veterans Boys basketball games. The junior game at 6 o'clock, the senior game at 7:45. Admission is $5 for adults, $3 for students. This year, all the proceeds go to the Red Cross and its Ukrainian humanitarian crisis appeal. And this Captain's Veterans basketball game has been going on forever. Remember, it used to be at Huron Park, and the great Bill Gillespie used to run it, along with the Referees Association and so many other charities to help run it over the years. So it continues tonight. I think it's the 40th anniversary tonight for Captain's Veterans basketball. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Accioni.
Thank you. I didn't have a green shirt, but I got a green tie, so I'm wearing my green tie to represent. So also Easter, of course, with bikes being out. Happy Easter, and there goes my dog again, so my apologies. It is time. I think I can finally officially say you can take your winter tires off. Knock wood. It'll be my fault if it snows again. I think we're safe. And don't forget, yeah, your recycling and garbage did change or possibly change this week. So stay tuned. Keep your calendar handy, of course, at least until you get used to it. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week.
Thank you. Last weekend was busy. I had a ribbon cutting at the 4 Golf, a new business in our community. Welcome to our city. When you're out and about, drop in. I am sure that they'd be happy to show you around. It's a very nice facility. Following that, I attended the Bay Baki Cultural Festival at the Polish Hall. This was the first of its kind in Woodstock, well attended. All those I spoke with had great praise for Woodstock. The organizer is hoping to have a much larger event later this year and extend a welcome to everyone in the city to learn more about each other's culture. This Sunday, I have the honor of attending the 200th anniversary of the First Baptist Church in Woodstock, 1822 to 2022, to bring greetings from council and the city. The Woodstock Art Gallery's annual Art in Bloom online auction bidding begins April the 11th through April the 25th. Proceeds are split between the local artists and the gallery. All funds raised goes to support the gallery's education programming. If you're looking for a special gift for Mother's Day or something to enliven your home or office or something unique for someone special, visit the gallery's website beginning Friday, April the 8th. Wishing everyone a happy Easter. And with that, I'll call for an adjournment. Councillor Petter and second by Councillor Accioni, all in favor?